Okay, that's right. So yesterday we learned about a horrible incident when two brothers married two sisters, and and they after the kedushin they swapped by mistake, so that it led to 16 chatois. It was a horrible situation. So the Gemara gets into a very important subject. Isser Chalal Isser. How did all these Isurim Chal? There was the Isser of Nida, there was the Isser of Eshes Ish, there was the Isser of Eshes Ach, and there was the Isser of Achos Isha. How does it work that they were all Chal? Uman Haitana Frek the Gemara, the Isle Isser Koilel, the Isser Moisef, the Isser Basachas. And Rashi lays it out exactly what had to have occurred in order for all these Isurim to be valid and then to require 4 chatois per person. So Rashi Manai Tanya the Masisin, the Isla Isser Chalal Isser, that holds that Isser Chalal Isser works in everything. Bein Alidei Koilel, Bein Bisser Moisef, and Bein Alidei Basachas. Each one of these will allow an Isser to be Chal in the Isser. And now Rashi lists off how this happens. Elu Shechayavan Arba Chatois. These 4 people, 2 husbands and 2 wives, are all Mechuyev in 4 Karbonos Chatois. The Kiddush Reuben is Rachel Tchila. When Reuben first married Rachel, Nesra al Shimon, right away Rachel became Osher to Shimon, Mishum Eshes Ach ve'Eshes Ish. 2 Yisurim happened simultaneously. Rachel became an Eshes Ach and an Eshes Ish at the same time. V'hainu bas Achas v'komechayev le'tanar tavayu. So here we see in the Mishnah a demonstration of 2 Yisurim that are Chal b'bas Achas. Then Chazar Shimon the Kiddush Leah. Then Shimon went and married Leah. So how does that Isser get added on? Migu de Asri Le Hanach Kedushin Bechulu Sharach Vasa Mishum Achosisha. By Shimon marrying Rachel, or by Shimon marrying Leah, he became Asr not only to Rachel but to all of the other sisters in that family. Asr Le Nami Ve'eshes Achiv Mishum Achosisha. It will also answer Rachel to him with a chaysisha. So now you have the concept of Isser Koil. The Alphagav, the Surah Lavakami, even though Rachel was also to him before, because she was already Eshesach and she was already an Eshesish. Behind Isser Koil, so that demonstrates how Isser Koil is relevant here. Vadain Rachel Zu Mutaris Reuben. At this point, Rachel is still mutter to Reuben, her own husband, and Leah's mutter to Shimon, her husband. But Pirsa Nida, if she became a Nida, Miku di Toisa Isra Allah, like Abi Baila, Mishum Nida, since the Isra Nida is chal upon her to her husband, who was mutter to her up until this point, Itoisef Bonami Isra like Abi Shimon, therefore Shimon will also have the Isra of Nida from Rachel upon him. So in this Mishnah, it demonstrates all of the different types of reasons why you would say Isra Chalal. Amar B'Domarav. Reb Meir is the Tana who we can identify. Reb Meir is the Tana who we can identify who hold that all 4 of these methods work. Sai Yisr Koil, Sai Yisr Moisef, and Sai B'Basachas. So 3 methods. The Tanya we learned. Yesh Oichel Achila Achas B'Chayev Aleha Arba Chatois. It's possible to eat one thing, and that will bring upon you 4 different Chayev Krisos, 4 different Averis. And Rashi lists them off. Arba chatois, mishum tumah da'oichel kachim. So he was eating kachim, but tumah saguf. So Rashi is giving us another hint. He ate kachim, which he wasn't allowed to eat. He was a czar. He ate tumah. He was tummy, and he ate it. So that's. I'm sorry. That's one thing. Oichel kachim with tumah saguf. His first isser is that he ate kachim with tumah saguf. That's a chiv kares. Umishum chaylev. This also happened to have been chaylev. There's another kares. Umishum noiser. It also happens to be noiser, which is another kares. And he's also breaking his fast as eating on Yom Kippur. And it's also an Ashama Elois because he's being moil b'hektish, eating part of the hektish he's not supposed to eat. Even a kohen, if he eats the emurin, which are the parts that should go onto the mizbeach, that's considered he's considered a zar and he's chayiv in meila. So you have one eating a guy ate 1 kazayis of meat, and in that kazayis he was mechuyev 4 chatois. The Asham Echad and the Asham of Asham Elos. And the Gemara says the case was Tomei, She'achal Chalev. The person that was Tomei, who ate Chalev. V'hu Noiser. This Chalev happens to be Noiser as well. Min HaMukdashin, and it was a part of a real carbon. and he did this all on Yom Kippurim. So he's over 4 chatois. The chatos of a tamei who's eating kachim. There's the chatos of eating chaleb. There's the chatos of eating noiser, and there's the chatos of eating on Yom Kippur. And there's the oshem me'ilos because he's eating something that's supposed to go on the mizbech. Reb Meir says, I'm going to add another isser to the mix. Shabbos. If while he was eating, he was walking too. And Toshma says that he swallowed. So while he was walking, he swallowed. That swallowing is considered a hanacha. So then he's also over on Shabbos. Rashi points out, which Toshma argues with, that if you hold that you're not allowed to carry Yom Kippur, so then you don't need Shabbos. It's Yom Kippur. He's carrying on Yom Kippur. So Rashi says it must be going according to the Mandamar that Ein Erev Vaytzal Yom Kippurim, and that's why it's stuck in Shabbos. Tosfos argues on that. Tosfos says we're going according to the Mandamar Erev Vaytzal. Zok to Gemara, Amr Loi. So they told Reb Meir the Isser of Shabbos doesn't really fit in here, because all of the other Isurim are Isurim of Achila. The Isser of Shabbos is an Isser of carrying. That's not considered b'achila achas. It happens to be coincidental that the achila is completing the haitzah. Okay, Zok to Gemara, Amr Loi Einam min Hashem. So now let's stop a second, because what we're trying to illustrate is just like we saw in the Mishnah, the application of Isser Koilo, Isser Moisev, and Isser Basachas. So too in this achila, we're also showing all these principles. So there's a long Rashi, but Rashi explains very nicely how each of these principles are exhibited in this case. So Zok Rashi, Shabbos, for Yom Kippur, you're not mechayev neitzah. The Kesavar ein erev haitzah l'yoyim HaKippurim. V'haki b'farish b'krisus. This is how the Gemara explains this mission in the Krisus. Alma isteler of Meir kulu. You see, he holds of all these three principles. The hahacha. Let's think about this. We should noiter behemazu v'yichulin. When this behemoth was born, it was created before anything happened to it. It's chulin. Right away, nesra chelba b'achila. We know it's also to eat the chelba of an animal, even if it's chulin. Umuter b'ana. But this animal will be muter b'ana. The moment the owner was makdash it, migu the toys of isra ana ala chelab mishum kachim. Now the entire animal becomes asr b'hana because it's kachim. But since there's an isra ana here, the chelab will also become asr b'hana. Isra beinami isra achila mishum zaris. So now we have, since there's an isra ana that's chal upon the chelab, there will also be an isra achila that's chal on it because of the kachim. So now we have an Isra Achila, Machmas Chelev, and Machmas Kachim. The Avag of the Asr V'Koi Ba'Achila, even though it's already Asr, Havalei Noiser became Noiser. There'll be a third Isra Achila from the Noiser. What's the Noiser adding? Migu di Toisev Isra Lemizbech Mishum Noiser, Toisev Nami Lekoyed Mishum Noiser. Since this Isra Noiser is going to include not only the person that was Asr Dit Noiser, but now it even Asrs the Mizbech from eating it, so that's Isra Noiser. Then nitma. Now this thing that was kachim became tamei. Up until now, it would have been mutter to eat the meat of kodesh if it was Torah, right? The achshav neser behem. And now that the carbon became tamei, now that meat becomes usher as well. Migu de mitzer b'shar chatichos mishum tuma. Migu that the other pieces of meat that up until now were mutter to eat are now also to eat. Nesunami bezu, this piece of chaylev that's noisar, that tome, this as well is become osir mishum tuma. Behind it, it's your that's your koil, because no more people are becoming nesar, but there's more meat becoming nesar. And then Aval Yom Kippurim, and then Yom Kippur said it. Migu de mitzur bechulin mishum Yom Kippurim. Migu that all achilas are osir on Yom Kippur. Asr nami b'kachim, it'll be chal on kachim, which anyway is asr at this point for many other reasons. Mishum Yom Kippurim. And nami isher koil, that's also isher koil. Zok to Rashi, umidemachayev le Reb Meir mishum haitzah Shabbos. And since Reb Meir also added the isser of Shabbos, alma isla isser basachas. You see there's an isser basachas as well. You see isser basachas as chayil. The kishakidish hayoim, when it became Yom Kippur, it's Shabbos and Yom Kippur came at the same time. The Kishkish Hayoim Chalulav Isra Chilat Yom Kippurim the Isra Shabbos. So there you see that since Shabbos is Chal B'Vasachas with Yom Kippurim, since Shabbos is Chal B'Vasachas with Yom Kippurim, you see the concept of Vasachas. So that's why we want to say that the Chatan of our Mishnah, who also agrees to these concepts of Isser Koil, Isser Moshe, and Vasachas, is Reb Meir. Who's Reb Meir going according to that you could be Mechuyev 4 chatois per person? If it's following the Shita of Rabbi Yeshua, and there's a machlokes about a case where there were 2 children, one was born on Shabbos and one was born on Sunday. So one child, you're allowed to be Mechal Shabbos to give him a bris on Shabbos, other one not. And they mixed up the 2 kids. So the question is there going to be a carbon chatas to be brought because someone Vishoigig did a milah that wasn't really a milah, so he made a chabur on Shabbos. So Rabbi Yeshua says, Ha'amar Tobit bar mitzvah potter. Rabbi Yeshua holds that when you're trying to do a mitzvah, and it ended up that it was a chiv karis, such as the case of this bris, you were trying to do a bris, a mitzvah, and it turned out being a chiv karis, you're potter from bringing the carbon chatas. So according to that shita, this was also a mistake, but it was a dvar mitzvah. He was doing the suin. So according to Rabbi Yeshua, there wouldn't be these karbanis chatas brought. Ela libid Rabbi Eliezer, must be going according to Rabbi Eliezer, who holds that even if you thought you were doing a mitzvah, you still have to bring a karban chatas. That's one shot. The Gemara says it's going according to Rabbi Eliezer. Or even according to Rabbi Yeshua, that when you mixed up the children and you gave the wrong child a bris on Shabbos, and that was Chil Shabbos, even though over there he holds there's no chatas, here there would be a chatas. Why? Why did Rabbi Yeshua say that Bar Mitzvah's potter? That was only when they mixed up the babies. This Zmanei Bol. People are a little bit pressured for time. Rashi says on Zmanei Bol, Shabbos he has only one day to mal this child properly, so he's a little bit frazzled and nervous. So he made a mistake because he wasn't calm. Aval Hai. But when someone does Nisuin, there's no deadline. He can do Nisuin tomorrow, the day after. There's no emergency. Maybe Rabbi Yeshua would agree that not every mitzvah do we say patas you from a chatas or it's tabid for mitzvah. Only if you're Torah in a mitzvah where there was a deadline, where you were stressed and pressured, and that caused you to get mixed up. Fact Gemara, I'm going to prove to you that even when you're not stressed, Rabbi Yeshua holds if you're Torah with mitzvah, you don't bring a carbon chatas. By truma, the ain't zmanei bol. Like a potter, someone who ate truma by mistake, it's not if someone who's eating truma, ben drusha ben chalutza. And while he was eating truma, someone told him, "You're eating truma? Ha, I know that your mother was a chalutza when your father married her, or your mother was a gerusha when your father married her. So you're not a kohen, you're a chalul. You're not allowed to eat truma." So Rabbi Lezer mechayev keren v'chaimish. Rabbi Lezer told you chayev keren v'chaimish. Because even though it's Tavar Mitzvah, you're still chayiv, like Rabbi Yeshua, like we quoted a minute ago by the case of the bris. Rabbi Yeshua potter, Rabbi Yeshua holds potter, and over there, why are you potter? According to Rabbi Yeshua, it's not zman bohol. So tomorrow it was zman bohol. Ha'itmar lo omar bibi barabai hacha b'truma b'erev pesach askinan zman bohol. We're speaking about truma that was chametz. He was eating bread that was from truma wheat, and he's stressed to eat it because the zman beer is arriving. And he wants to eat it up quickly, so that's why he made a mistake and he ate truma by mistake. But in a regular case where there's no fear, maybe even Rabbi Yeshua would agree that Tod bar mitzvah would be chai. The iser bas achas. It's or you could say that we will remove. What did we want to say? We wanted to say that Reb Meir holds of all these isurim, he holds of Isser Koil and Isser Moshe. No. Maybe it's speaking where everything happened with Vasachas. In other words, maybe our Mishnah that says that there's all these chiyuvim, there's a chiyuv for Eishesach, and a chiyuv for Achosisha, and a chiyuv for Nida, and a chiyuv for Eishesish, maybe they don't involve Isser Koil, maybe they don't involve it for Moshe, maybe they're all with Vasachas, and they all occur at exactly the same time. I'll leave it to Rabbi Shimon, and even to go according to Rabbi Shimon, because we learned yesterday, there's a machlokes bar kapara and a Piyah, about what Reb Shimon would hold of by Yisrael Chalalisser if they're Chal B'Vasachas, and we brought a raya that Reb Shimon would agree that B'Vasachas it's Chal. So maybe our mission is going according to Reb Shimon, not according to Reb Meir, and maybe it's speaking where everything occurred at exactly the same time, and that's what it's for Chatois. So now the Gemara needs to go through how that happened. So Bishlam Kulu Mishkachas Lahu. I understand how Eshes Ish and Eshes Ach and the Chos Isha all occurred at the same time. The Shavinu Shliach. Vishavu inu shliach. Upaga shliach b'shliach. The two brothers made a shliach to make the kedushin. The two sisters made a shliach to be makabel the kedushin, and shliach A met shliach B. So all four people, or the two couples, got married at precisely the same moment. It was all the masach. How are you going to say that they became a nida at precisely the same time that all the Yisurim were chal, precisely at the time of the kedushin? It's yesh shalatamtim. How could you make it exactly occur that way? Amar v'amam amar Rav, that's not a problem. B'shefas mitoich gimel lachish lo yishasar l'chiyuvi inu, mitoich shnei masar lachish shnei masar l'chiyuvi inhi. What does this mean? It means that when they were making the kedushin, it was going to be chal at exactly their birthday, which means the boys and the girls, the two sisters and two brothers, were born on the same day of the year. They had the same birthday, but they were 1 year apart. So they made the kedushin to be chal at the same moment that the boys turned 13 and the girls turned 12. At that very moment is when all of this kedushin was chal. These women were nidas from before, and therefore their Isra nida is not chal, not on them, not on the boys, because they're katanim. So it all works out that the kedushin was toivis at the very moment that they became gedolim and gedolos. So therefore the Isra nida was chal at that very same instant. So you have all of these isurim that are being chal at the same time. So could be that's pshat in the Mishnah. So at the end of the day, we have two pshatim in our Mishnah. Either it's an unusual case where everything occurred precisely at the same moment, and it's all relying on the concept of basachas, that two isurim were b'chal basachas, A, or B is maybe they occurred one after the other, and we're relying on the sheet of Reb Meir, who holds that you use Isser Koil, Isser Moisef, and B'vasachas. It says Mafrisha Noisan. You have to separate them for 3 months because we want to find out if this woman became pregnant from this bia. Is it her husband's child or is it the mamzer from the wrong man that she lived with? So if you keep her apart for 3 months, we'll know if she became pregnant. Frank Gemara, how could you become pregnant? Do we not have a rule that a woman does not become pregnant from her first bia, the bia that breaks her basulim? Because it can't break basulim and fertilizer at the same time. In the case of the Mishnah where it said there was a bia, it doesn't mean there was only one bia. It means there were two bias. If there's two bias, now it creates a lot of trouble. When Rabchia said that there's 16 chatois, 4 per person per bia, it should be 32. It should be 16 times 2 because you're saying there were two bias. Even if there weren't two bias, we have another problem. Because there's a halacha, we all learned it, that if someone is in the middle of being boiled his wife, and in the middle she feels that she was pierced and up, he's not even allowed to pull out. Because when he pulls out, that friction also creates pleasure, and that will be mechayiv him with chorus. So what he has to do is he has to support himself on his hands and feet until his aver goes limp, and then he can pull out. So you see that even half a piyah, every tiny little bit of hana that he has will create his own chiyuv chorus. So I'm not sure exactly how you count every little bit of hana, but whatever it is, one biyah can also deliver multiple chiyuv chatois. So according to Rabbi Lazar, there's many more. So how do you understand the Mishnah then? Ella, what do you have to say? The bekoyach reaching the all Rabbi meant is for every act of Isser, there'd be a chatos. But in fact, there might be multiples here. Hachanami, the biyah rishaynik chashiv, even though there are two biyahs here, he could be referring to the amount of chatos per transgression. Amar Rabbi Rab Nachman. So Rabbi asked Rab Nachman the following question: Tamar, Yehuda and Tamar, when Tamar became pregnant from Yehuda, it was biyah rishaynik. She was a basula at the time. Rashi says when she became pregnant from Yehuda, it was the biyah rishaynik because all of her husbands, Aaron and Oinan, Rashi tells us, were only mishamash with her shaloi kedarka. And if you ask him what shaloi kedarka means, I'm going to give you a patch, and I'm going to ask you, kedarka vaistiyah? Amalei.
1 second. Rashi says on that he. That's right.
So the Gemara is going to get to that. The Gemara is going to get to the nitty gritty. This is going to be I'm happy there's not a big oil here today because this is the type of Gemara that could be uncomfortable. Zok the Gemara weiter. literally and figuratively. Amalei Tamar. So he told her, Tamar, you know how she became pregnant? It's because she broke her basulim by hand before she was novellas to Yehuda. She wanted to become pregnant. She knew she was a basula, so she broke her basulim by hand. Amalei Tamar be'etz b'mocha. She broke her own basulim. Why? Because she wanted to become pregnant. Tamar b'yitzchak kol moy achos shall base Rebbe Tamar Shimon. The girls in Rebbe's family insisted that their husbands sit and learn. So what they would do is as soon as they had their first night with their husband, they sent them off to yeshiva. There's a famous story with Rabbi Yisrael Newman. The first night of Sheva Brachas, he still ran to yeshiva after Sheva Brachas, and he didn't come home until 1 o'clock in the morning. When he came into the house, his wife said, "What a batlin are you? You think I married you? You should come home. Go back to yeshiva." And he went to yeshiva and never came back. So anyway, so the same thing. Exactly. So all the women from Rebbe's household would send their husbands to learn right away after the first biyah. But because of that, they wouldn't become pregnant. So what they did is they manually broke their basulim so that the bir rishona would afford them the opportunity to become pregnant. They were out there. You know what they were called? They were called the Tamar clan. Why? Because they all did what Tamar did. So all of the Mayachash Obeis Rebbe, Tamar Shimon, Lama Nikra Shimon Tamar. Why were they called Tamar? Al Shem Tamar Shemacha Batzba. So that's where that comes from. Frank Gemara have Erva Einon. What about Erva Einon? How could you say that Tamar was a basula and she had to break her basulim before she had a relation with Yehuda? Wasn't she married to Er and Einon? So Gemara Erva Einon Shimshu Shaloi Kedarkim. Er and Einon did be a Shaloi Kedarka, so it never damaged her basula. Meister Frank Gemara Kol Esrim of Arba Chodesh for 24 months after someone has a child. And his wife is nursing, and he doesn't want her to become pregnant because it'll impact her nursing. So the halacha is, we don't pass him like this. He should pull out before he's mashriya, and therefore she won't become pregnant. Divi Rabbi Eliezer, that's Rabbi Eliezer said. Hold Rabbi Eliezer, how could you suggest that that's what someone should do? Chas v'sholom, halalu einay ela kamaisa erev einon. That's like the maisa erev einon. That's highly inappropriate. Einon died for it. And you're going to suggest that Afirma Yid should do that? Zokt Gemara, you're right. So, but this also proves that Erev Einon was Dashmin B'fnim V'Zarim B'Chutz, not B'Yishalai Kedaka. Zokt Gemara, Kamaisa Erev Einon, V'loi Kamaisa Erev Einon. It's like the Maisa, but not exactly like it. What does that mean? Kamaisa Erev Einon D'chsev V'Hayim Ba'al Eishes Achiv V'Shichis Artza. It says V'Hayim Ba'al Eishes V'Shichis, meaning he pulled out because he didn't want it to become pregnant. It's not exactly like Ma'aser Einon because there it was Shaloi Kedarka, V'Hacha Kedarka, and here it's Kedarka. Zok to Gemara. So what is the Gemara saying? It's not exactly like Ma'aser Einon. Rabbi Lezer is saying, you should be Dash from Zer B'Chutz, and they told him that's Kamaisa Erev Einon. Zok to Gemara, it doesn't mean it was Mamish Erev Einon. In fact, Erev Einon was Shaloi Kedarka. And that's why she wouldn't become pregnant, but this is a case of Dash Mifim B'Zar B'Chutz. Zok to Gemara, Bishlam Einon, I understand, we know he pulled out. It says V'Shichis Arza. However, Ella Er, we know, how do you know Er did that? It doesn't say anything about Er that he was mashris his era. It says Hashem killed Oinon as well. So it's mashma that it was similar to what happened by Er. For the same reason. I understand why he didn't want to impregnate Tamar. He didn't want to give up his zera that it should be Basar, his brother, which is what the pasuk says. It was his first wife. Why would there be any problem? Why didn't he want to become pregnant? My time al-Hafi. So Gemara, he didn't want to become pregnant, and it would ruin her beauty. So because of that, he was boiler shaloi kedarka that she shouldn't lose her beauty.
That means Rashi was very misleading. He didn't, he didn't say anything about Shaloi Kedarka. He says Dosh B'fnim, right? Yeah.
But in fact, that's not what occurred by Erev Einon. So why doesn't Rashi say the real pshat.
Right.
But our Gemara fears Ois Lamaskada
That's
that
right.
it was. Well, maybe he's not going according to Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer is saying it's. I'm sorry. Rabbi Eliezer says that that's what a person should do, and they said you shouldn't do it. It's only Kamais Erebanim. No, maybe according to this sheet that we're saying here, according to this sheet that we're saying here, that Tamar was Mamach Betzvah. Maybe Rash, maybe not everybody holds like this Gemara that Tamar was Mamach Betzvah. Maybe others learn that Tamar was Takanara Basur. It's only according to this shot.
Okay.
Okay, so let's see what the Gemara says over here. Tanu Rabbanim, Oisa. It says in the pasuk. This is a pasuk that we actually learned yesterday, and the pasuk says if someone has an intimate relation with a woman, and he's boiler, she has to go to the mikveh. She becomes tamei. The pasuk says even if she's not a nida, just being with a woman makes it that he has to go to the mikveh and that she has to go to the mikveh. That's what the pasuk is telling us. I don't have the chumash in front of me, and my Gemara doesn't have the psukim.
A minute. Only if they're going to eat kachim. Only if they're going to go into the Beis Hamikdash. Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Nowadays we're anyway tamei tumas meis. So zok to Gemara oisa prat lechala. It says that she is tamei, but is a meat of the word oisa to tell you that a kalama, meaning the bir rishona, which is not mazriya, that bir rishona would not make her tamei. So the isha asher yishkav ish oisa shichvazera rachdu b'mayim b'tamei ara'or. Oh, beautiful. So Oisa tells you that this doesn't apply to the first bia of a kala. Rashi is the light boy tefillah mishum tumas bir rishona. The first bia that a woman has does not require tefillah. Divi Rabbi Yehuda. The chachamim maimerim prat l'shaloi kedarka. Oisa is telling you that a bia shaloi kedarka, which cannot be mazriya, that is the bia that Oisa is being a ma'it. Amalei hun b'reider Rab Nachman. Rab Nachman had a son Hun, and he told his father the following: Leimikasav Rabbi Yehuda. Let's say Rabbi Yehuda holds chasa al tachshitei chala. It could be what happens. Here this chala puts on all this beautiful makeup, and if we force her to go to the mikveh the next morning, it's going to mess up her makeup. So the Torah said, even though she should be tamei because she had relations, we're going to give her a waiver for one day, so it shouldn't mess up her makeup. Amar lei, no, that's not the reason. It's not because Hashem wants the because
how could that be?
It's makeup.
Not a derabanan, it's a deraisa, isn't it?
Right. So the Torah is chos. The Torah is chos, and the Torah is saying that we will not make the woman tummy the first time because we don't want to mess up her makeup.
Based on what word?
Isa.
Isa, still on the Isa. Okay.
Yeah.
All
so
right.
Amar lei. So Reb Nachman says, no, that's not the reason at all. It's not because Hashem was worried about his makeup. It's l'lisha. Ein isha mishaberes mebir rishayna. The reason is because a woman would not become pregnant from the bir rishayna. So it's not called a shichva zera. It's not called a shichva zera. Zoktamar b'mai kamifilgi. What is the machlokes? Because we have a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda, who says ois is prat l'kala, and the Chum who says prat l'shloi kedarka. So tomorrow abundant suffering shichva zera prat l'hara. If it was not a bia that could lead to a pregnancy, meaning he didn't complete the bia, he only put in the tip, that cannot lead to a pregnancy, that would not make someone tummy. You don't need oisa for that, because it already says in the pasuk, it's only the type of bia that could lead to a pregnancy. Only that is going to become tummy. So therefore, hara will not make him tummy. Oisa is prat l'shaloi kedarka. Oisa is mamayit a bish like kedarka, which is what the Chachamim said. Rabbi Yehuda Savar shaloi kedarka v'hara is mishich v'zeren after sai shaloi kedarka and sai hara, which both cannot be mazriya. Both of those are nismayit from shich v'zera, and the oisa is an extra pasuk. Prat l'kala says that a kala does not either become tomei. Because
I was under the impression that the zera makes the woman.
Oh, very good kasha. Rashi in Chumash yesterday asked the kasha, and Rashi here says the same thing. And Rashi says tumas beis hasarim is not tamei. Since the zera only touches her inside her body, it's not on the outside of her body. That's called tumas beis hasasarim, and tumas beis hasasarim does not make you tummy. So in fact, the fact that the zera touched her internally does not create any tummy.
Right, but there's also, you know what? There's all sorts of leakage. That's not taken into
There's
account.
the mess. There's the
Yeah.
mess involved. Yeah, but then it shouldn't say asher yishkev isha shich v'zera. It should say visha keyiga b'shich v'zera, because the shchiva itself is tumas beis hasasarim. The leakage later is negia already. So maybe that wouldn't be what the pasuk is referring to.
So she's not tummy, but he is tummy?
No, neither of them will be tamei.
Neither of them.
If it's be a shayna.
Okay.
I mean, Pasha, it doesn't make sense that she won't be and he will be.
I know, that's, we're talking about her, Isa. We're using the word
No,
Isa.
Isa is a woman in a different type of via, but I'm not. But he would be tamei anyway because Zera left him. Whenever Zera leaves,
right.
he's tamei anyway. So he would be tamei anyway, probably.
So he would.
He's not only tamei because of the bia, he's tamei because Zera left him.
Right.
So there's two reasons why he would be tamei. Okay, so let's see the Gemara. He also Rabin, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. When Rabin came, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, a new thing. Kol sheshasa achar bayla eser shanim. If a woman becomes a widow or becomes divorced, so now she's not married, and she waits 10 years or more before she remarries, then this says shuveni yeladis. This woman will no longer be able to have children. Amar Rab Nachman, lo shanu ela shein daita linase. This is only true if the woman for 10 years had no intention of ever getting remarried. But if she always intended to get remarried, she just didn't find the right one yet, then misaberes, then she will still become pregnant. You see how a person's mind actually impacts their physics, their physical body. Amar le Rava lebasha B'chista. Rava told the daughter of Rab Chista, Kamarani Rabbanan Abasreich. The Rabbanan are talking about you. Why? Because Rava was first married to Rami Bar Chama. After he died, she waited 10 years before she married Rava, and then she had children. So Rava said, the people are talking about you that you must have had relations in between while you were a widow, and you were acting promiscuous. Amr lay, so Rava's wife told her, no, don't worry about it. I was always planning to marry you. And Tosfos tells us that in Bava Basra, once upon a time, Rav Chista's daughter was sitting on his lap, and Rami Bar Chama and Rava were both Talmidim of Rav Chista. They came by, and Rav Chista asked his little daughter, "So who are you going to marry?" So she says, "What do you mean, who am I going to marry? I'm going to marry them both." And there was a nevuah. So she first got married to Rami Bar Chama, and after Rami Bar Chama died, she didn't want to marry anybody, even though she wanted to get married, because she knew that she was able to marry Rava. But the problem was Rava was married at the time, so she was waiting for Rava to lose his wife, so that she should be able to be Makayim her prophecy and marry Rava. And that's in fact what happened. Another time, Allah Havai. Hahi, the Ashila Kamed Rabbi Yosef. There was a woman who came to Rabbi Yosef. Amrullah, she told him, your Torah is wrong. Rabbi Anna Shahisi Acher Baili Eser Shanim. After my husband died, for 10 years I didn't remarry. After 10 years I remarried, Violadati, and I gave birth. Amrullah, he told her, Biti, Al Taitzi Las Al Divicham. Don't try to make it look like the words of the Torah are wrong. The words of the Torah are right. You might have forgotten maybe a little one-night stand that you had in between. In fact, I was at a bar one night in those 10 years, and I was having a good time. In fact, I was Nevela, so I wasn't 10 years without Bia. Amar Shmuel, anytime a woman is separating from another man, she has to wait 3 months before she could marry somebody else, because of Avchana, we want to know if she is pregnant, we want to know who's the father of the child. What are the exceptions? Chutz migiyares u'meshachreres ketan. A giyares who became a giyares while she was a ketana, or a shivcha who became a shukher when she was a ketana, they don't have to wait 3 months. Aval ketana bas Yisrael, but a ketana bas Yisrael, meaning a ketana who was married to one man and then she was divorced before she could marry another man, shricha lahamtin gimel chodashim. She has to wait. Why was she leaving her first husband? Even miyun, if she made miyun, you don't have to wait 3 months, because Amar Shmuel, Shmuel said you don't need to wait for miyun. And Rashi says, why? Because it's very not shchiach. The only reason why really a katana won't get pregnant, the only reason why you make them wait is because we don't want you to mix up between a katana and a gedola. But miyun is not shchiach, so for me and Shmuel said that you don't have to wait. Viva get, and if this woman got a get from her husband, Hamer Shmuel Chadazidna. Shmuel already said this halacha. Damer Shmuel miyanaboy ain't tzricha lahamtim shloisha chadashim. Nasan laget tzricha lahamtim shloisha chadashim. So that's the case. Why do I need this new memra? Why do I need this new memra of Shmuel? What is it teaching us that we don't otherwise know? Elab is nus. It must be speaking where they had nus. The Gazer Rabbanon Kitana Mishum Gedola. If a Gedola had nus, you have to wait 3 months because we don't know if she became pregnant. Kana, even though we know can't become pregnant, but Shmuel is saying there's a gzeira that they should not do it. But by the Giyoris, Tana, they weren't Geyser Rashi just because it's Lo Shchiach. Frank Gemara, Mika is reading Katana Mishum Gedola. Are you telling me that a Katana who's Mizana, we're going to make her wait 3 months because just in case it happens to a Gedola? But now we learned, if these are women that are Katanas that could never have given birth anyway, that's what our mission says. So our Mishnah says when it comes to katanos, you don't separate them for 3 months. So how could you, Shmuel, say that you separate katanos for 3 months because we're going to katanos unto gedolos? Zakta Gemara, Amrav Gidel Amarav, Hayra Shah Haysa. The Mishnah's case was a Hayra Shah. It was a Hayra Shah. It was a very unusual, crazy case. It was a Hayra Shah. Frank Gemara, Maklal Havai. Are you actually trying to tell me that the case of the Mishnah actually occurred? Of course it didn't occur. The Mishnah is just saying a theoretical halacha, what will be if it occurred? The Mishnah doesn't say Ma'aseh Shahaya. The Mishnah is just saying a Mishnah. So what do you mean it was a Hayra Shah? It never happened. The Mishnah is saying such a crazy thing happened, since it's so unusual, we wouldn't require a katana to wait for 3 months. Frank Gemara. Because the reason why they weren't mandate waiting 3 months is because such a crazy story is so unlikely. In such a case, we wouldn't be gozer at the Lishnachrina. There's another way, the way this went down. Omri la Omer Shmuel. Kulon shrichos lahamtim shloisha chadashim chutz migiyares u'mishachareres. They all have to wait 3 months, except for Gedola. Even a Gedola does not have to wait, which we're going to need to know why. Maybe she was pregnant from her earlier bia. So the Gemara is going to need to explain. Alva katana bas Yisrael, a katana even a bas Yisrael, einet tzricha lahamtim gilmul chadashim does not have to wait. What is this case? Iba miyun ha'amar Shmuel chadazimna. Iba get haka amar Shmuel. The boy, the amar Shmuel miyana boy einet tzricha lahamtim shloisha chadashim. Nasan laget tzricha lahamtim shloisha chadashim. So legabi, what halacha is Shmuel saying that a katana bas Yisrael doesn't have to wait? Elab nus. It means if we know a katana had nus when she was married, there we don't have to wait 3 months till she goes back to her husband because we know she didn't become pregnant, and we're not going to at the gedola. It was nus b'katana lo shchiach, and therefore we're not going to katana at the gedola. But giyaris and mishachareres the shchich nus ligzar by giyaris and mishachareres where they are a goya would be mizana, and a shivcha is mizana. So how come we don't make them wait 3 months? Zaktimar who do Amar Rabbi Yosy Titania hagiyaris v'ashvuya v'ashivcha sheniftu. A giyaris, or a woman who was captured, or a shivcha, that it was either redeemed ransom, the shvuya was ransom, nishkayu, the giyaris was nishkayu, or the shivcha was nishtachru. Shricha is lahamtim gimel chadashim. They do need to wait 3 months. Divi Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosy mater le'ares u'lenasim miyad, and Rabbi Yosy allows them to get married right away. Amar Rabba, Rabba said, my time with Rabbi Yosy. How could Rabbi Yosy allow them to get married right away if they become pregnant right away? We're not going to know, is this the child that was born before they became Jewish, or was this the child that was conceived after they became Jewish? So tomorrow, because Kasavar Isha Mizana Meshameshes B'moich Kadesh Lo Tishaber. The reason why we don't need this preparation is because this break is because any woman who's in an illicit relationship, she doesn't want to become pregnant from it. So because of that, she'll use birth control, and she'll use a diaphragm of some type. So therefore, she'll keep it with her, and she'll make sure to protect herself from becoming pregnant. So therefore, we're not concerned that she became pregnant with such a relationship. Amar Abaye, okay, B'shlomi Giyaris, I can understand the Giyaris. She knows what's going on. She's not being raped. Even the Daita Giyure, since she knows she wants to become a Giyaris, not from one day to the next. So for the months before, Minter and Navsha, Hidelahavkin, Ben Zerish and Israel Bekdusha, who Ben Zerish and Israel Bekdusha. A woman's planning to become a Giyaris, she doesn't need Avchana because we know even before she became a Giyaris, she was careful to use birth control. But Shavuya V'Shivcha, it's not up to them. Their captors or their master will, at the spur of the moment, grab them and have relations with them. So how they can't be prepared. Zok Gemara, Nami, the Shami Mimarayu, Umintri Navshayu. They know that their masters or their captors want to be with them, so they keep this birth control close to them to be ready at any moment in the event that they're going to need it. However, if you're talking about a shivcha who's nishtachar because her tooth got knocked out, she has no idea that this is going to happen. She has no idea that she's going to be going free. So what are the chances that she's going to have prepared birth control? So a shivcha that went free, not because she was redeemed, but she went free because she would not have known 3 months in advance that this was going to happen. So if she didn't know 3 months in advance this was going to happen, she wouldn't have had birth control. So how come those women don't need avchana? The chitema kol the memela moide Rabbi Yosy. And if you're going to say that Rabbi Yosy agrees that memela is something that's very unlikely to happen, so therefore Rabbi Yosy wouldn't be concerned. Zok Gemara, but now we learned anusa mafuta shricha lahamtin gimel chadashim divrei Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yosy mater le'aris v'linasim miyad. So anusa mafuta is Yisraelis. Varei oinais memelahu ve'ein lamoich. Right, memela is something that happens at the spur of the moment. So if you're going to say Rabbi Yosy, if you're going to say Rabbi Yosy is moida, that in the case of a woman who went out b'shein ba'ayin, it's taka going to be aser, and there he will not let her get married right away. He will make her wait. We learned that the Rabbi Yosy holds even by nanusa, he's matir li'arish l'nasam yad, and there as well she could not have possibly been prepared. So why aren't we worried that we're not going to know who the child comes from? Alam Rabbi, I'll tell you why. Is isha mizana misapecha shalot yisaber. A woman who's being mizana, who doesn't want to become pregnant, well, as soon as the bee is over, she'll position her body so that the zera should leak out as quickly as possible to reduce the chances of her becoming pregnant. And therefore, even a woman who's yoytz b'shem v'ayin, she's a shivcha. She doesn't want to become pregnant from her master. It's not a relationship that she wants to have. She's forced to live with him because she's a shivcha. So therefore, she will always do whatever she could to avoid becoming pregnant. And she'll always position herself so the zera should leak out. Zok Gemara, those who argue on Rabbi Yosy and hold that you do need 3 months. Why do they hold you need 3 months? It's not such a perfect method of birth control, and therefore we're choshed that maybe she became pregnant anyway. So they ask, the Nadibuda asks, why is it that air always was dashed with him or did be the first bia where we know a woman cannot become pregnant from the first bia? So why didn't he lead to the first bia right? So the answer is that even though we have a rule that a woman doesn't become pregnant from the Bir Shina, it's not 100% foolproof. And he didn't even want to take a small chance. If these women were kahanos, they can no longer eat truma. In fact, more kahanos in Yisraelis loy. Are you telling me that if they were women who were the daughters of Yisraelim married to kahanim, are you going to say that they're allowed to eat truma? Of course not. And so tomorrow, if they're the wives of kahanim, and this happened to them, they could no longer eat truma. What if they were girls who were born to kahanim families, and they would marry Yisraelim? So when they marry Yisrael, they can't eat truma. But if the marriage breaks up and they go back home, they would be able to eat truma. But if they were mizana, they wouldn't be. So it's not only kahanis, it's not only neshei kahanim, it's even neshei Yisraelim. Rav Sheshes taught us this, and he proved it to us from a Mishnah. And this is what the Mishnah says. He brought a raya from a Mishnah. And the halacha that he brought a raya to is as follows. Ashes Yisrael Shenensa, the wife of a Yisrael that was raped, Aval Pisha Butaris Lebaila, even though she's allowed to continue living with her husband because she's Benas, Psul Kuna. Should this husband die, and this woman now wants to marry a Kohen, she cannot marry a Kohen because in her previous marriage to Yisrael, she was raped. That passes her to a Kohen. So you see from here that even if she was a Bas Yisrael, so even if she was a Bas Kohen, she'll become Pasal Kuna. So meaning if she was a Kohenes that was married to a Yisrael and she gets raped, she's mutter to her Baal. But if the marriage ends, she can no longer eat truma. So Amarava Hachikamar, this is what the Mishnah means. If they were Kohanos that were married to Yisraelim, in fact, since they were raped, they will still, even though it was an oinus to them because it was chutlafu, they didn't do it on purpose, they will still become possible from truma. Okay, so now we are one amud ahead, and I wanted to get a little bit ahead because Pesach is going to be probably a little challenging.